I'm Dennis Freeman. I was in the Army. I was in active duty from August 69 through the end of May 71. I got up to first lieutenant on active duty and subsequently in the reserve, made captain. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, which is my mother's hometown. I was primarily raised in Los Banos, California, which is a small farming town in the San Joaquin Valley, or at the time it was a small farming town. For 3 years during the Korean War, I lived in North Dakota and Montana. My father had gotten recalled to active duty and was stationed up there. Growing up in Los Banos in the 50s was like all these sitcoms, the perfect community. We didn't lock doors. You'd leave keys in the car in case somebody had to move it. Very pleasant place to grow up. I think it was in 63 or 64, I heard President Kennedy I know he mentioned Laos, and I thought I heard Vietnam. And I distinctly remember the Tonkin Bay speech that President Johnson made. My father supported it. My mother was a little bit ambivalent, and then when I got an orders for it, she was a little more, why are they sending people here? I have no idea what my sisters thought of it. Of my cousins, I had one cousin that spent a couple of years on active duty. He did not deploy to Vietnam, and the other male cousins did not serve. I took ROTC at the University of San Francisco. They only had Army ROTC. The first 2 years were mandatory. You had to apply for the third and fourth year, which led to commissioning. I basically did not want to have some 22-year-old punk second lieutenant telling me what to do, so I took ROTC, and 40 other people had that problem. I had made armor my first choice because I had some knee problems from college track and really did not want to be an infantry officer. Going on active duty, we had armor officer basic school at Fort Knox, which was 8 or 9 weeks for newly commissioned officers in armor branch. I also attended the training officers orientation course that the 1st Army NCO Academy provided, and later attended the jungle operations course in Panama. When it was time for my flight, my parents drove me to Travis. From Travis, taking the Great Circle route, the pilot landed in Makawa, Japan by mistake, and we were on the runway in August without air conditioning for 20 minutes until he realized he was supposed to go to Kadena, Okinawa. At Kadena, they kept the same airplane, but they changed crews to people that just went in and out of Vietnam. And I can't recall whether we landed at Ben Hoa or Tan Son Nhut, somewhere near Saigon, and the buses took us to the 90th Replacement Depot. I joined during a squadron maintenance stand down. We then went out to an area of 3 Corps near the 2 Corps border, Ben Tui province, and a little bit of the province just inland from there. And we were basically between Vung Tau and Phan Thiet for people looking at a map. Initially, I was a platoon leader. That meant I had 40 people and 10 armored vehicles, and I was responsible for reconnaissance and force. If we found something, they'd bring in another platoon. There's a matter of semantics. The only thing we destroyed were base camps out in the middle of free fire zones, and if we catch a rice paddy out there, we knew that it wasn't from the local place, so we'd do a few donuts really with some armored vehicles, and the rice paddy would disappear. Spin around a bit, and you have chewed up dirt after that. Vietnamese people out in the villages were very nice, very committed people. I liked them, and again, I living with an advisory team. The ones I were working with were very committed to the government. The village actually was mostly people that had fled the north in 1954. I think that a lot of GIs got the wrong impression of the Vietnamese from the people that worked in the very large base camps like Cam Ranh Bay or Long Binh, where all they saw were the club girls, the bartenders. They're the Vietnamese you saw, and where you could get the wrong idea. Vietnam was a true civil war. The Northerners and South Vietnamese didn't really like each other. There were 3 ethnic groups, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, and the Montagnards, and none of them liked each other. And there were Catholics, Buddhists, and Cao Dais in the country, and they really didn't like each other. I'm surprised Vietnam is sort of peaceful now. People forget that right after they fought us, they inflicted even more casualties than the Chinese in the border dispute. The North Vietnamese regulars are very highly trained, very good soldiers. Well, we were fighting where North Vietnamese regulars had been drafted and sent south. After Tet in 1968, there really was no more Viet Cong. Even the units that were labeled Viet Cong were full of Northerners. The Viet Cong had nationalists that were not communists, and they were the ones that were sent to attack large installations and get themselves slaughtered. The M48s that we were driving, they were very heavy. They couldn't go a lot of places. They had a big gun and lots of armor, and they could be effective. The troops had M551 Sheridans, and Sheridan had a very large main gun. And if they could get into a position to use canister rounds, basically something was over. And M113A cabs were much lighter. We had gun shields around everyone, and my crew was always trying to hide the second radio antenna, or disconnect it if they could. Command track has 2 radios instead of 1. At that time, they were using PT-76 and T-34s. Their armor only crossed the border twice, once at Long Bay near Khe Sanh, and at a place called Ben Het near the southern tri-border. At Long Bay, they really decimated the Special Forces group and their Mike force. About my saying a platoon leader is like a god. You've got, 25 to 40 people, and if you make a mistake, they're dead. If you lose someone, you don't want to be that tied to them, because the more emotionally you get tied to them, the more mistakes you're going to make. Even if you don't make a mistake, after a while it starts wearing on you. What if? Nobody liked to do dismounts. Who am I going to send to go up check out that trail? Which vehicle is going to be busting jungle today? We're going down a road march. The road could be mined. Which vehicle is going to take the point? But that was very difficult for me to handle, was that feeling of being God. I didn't realize until I bumped into a few of them at various cab reunions that, they actually liked me and thought I was a good guy. And it was and I didn't go to reunions for a few years just because of that, because I didn't want to bump into somebody that thought I was the asshole that got his buddy hurt or something like that. Even without fire, you can take casualties. I had a scout section leader that lost a hand when a towing cable just popped loose and went like that. One thing I'd like to point out is, the American soldiers really did try to be the good guys. And I can remember especially when our tank company was doing some roadblocks with the National Police, and they'd send detainees back, and one day, I'm getting ready to pick up the detainee when all of a sudden the radio here, this is Battle 6, I want a conference with the province commander. Battle 6 being the squadron commander, 2nd Squadron. We're in there, it's the police advisor, the province senior advisor, my squadron commander, the chaplain, and a sergeant major, and this very scared, very pretty looking 15-year-old or so girl. And the argument ensues. The police advisor, who was arguing that, she must be Viet Cong, and the squadron commander talks to her in Vietnamese. And finally, the conference ends when he stands up and said, my helicopter is going back to Xi'an for maintenance. The chaplain is bringing her to her mother in Saigon. And I think, that's the American Army. My army, that's not the army of Cali and My Lai and that sort of stuff. Especially, I know in the 11th Cab, we did a lot more like that. I can't think of any atrocities. I called my parents and said, on a flight landing at San Francisco, and I told them the time, and their drive time to SFO was going to be about the length of my flight. Got off the airplane, and I'm walking down, and I had a big old handlebar mustache then. They didn't recognize me at first. Came back up to San Francisco to start school, so I was going to be going to graduate school. When I was going to school, I bumped into somebody I knew from USF that was also just back from Vietnam. He had lost a foot at ripcord. He's with the 101. And talking to him helped a lot. I tried working a while, then going to school full-time a while, then part-time. One job interview, someone said, "Oh, you were a lieutenant, huh? Is that like William Calley?" I heard other people say, "Oh, you guys were all war criminals, don't deny it, and you're worse because you were an officer." I tried to stay away from the people that were, spitting on veterans, calling us war criminals, and hoped that they would stay away from me. I never hid on my resume the fact that I was a Vietnam veteran, and a lot of prejudice, and to some extent I got around it. The town I grew up in, it was sort of, if you didn't go in the Army, you were a commie, coward, or queer. If I had to go to a war, I'm glad it was Vietnam instead of Afghanistan. I really think, again, Vietnam was a true civil war, and if people were on our side, they were on our side. They weren't turning on their advisors and shooting them in the back. And I think, the original concept of the domino theory may or may not have worked, but what's scary about the domino theory is they got rid of Sukarno, the communist in Indonesia, and he's been replaced by an Islamic regime. So, it's the law of unintended consequences. The objectives were right, and I think at times it got wrong, and I have real problems about when the end came. And for years we wanted to get the North Vietnamese army massed on the plains outside of Saigon so they could bomb the crap out of them. That happened in 1975, and not only did we not send any bombers over, we wouldn't give the Vietnamese army fuel for their tanks or ammunition for their guns. That bothered me a lot, because up until that day we were doing something that with a good purpose that made a lot of those 58,000 names wasted in vain.